Sponsored by the Dunleary Rattown Local Enterprise Office. You're listening to Business Eye on Dublin South FM.
Yes, it's Friday and our children have gone back to school or going back to school, and that is for primary and secondary school. There's little girls and little boys starting junior infants today. So excited. And I was thinking as I was sending my new beautiful little daughter off to school, you know what popped into my head? She was so excited, but I went, into the system you go. And we know sometimes those systems can have different effects on our children, maybe even taking away their creativity, their individual process. But if we understand that and know that, we can teach them that at home as well. But as they head off, we have to take those slippers off and we have to put on those stomping boots because the work engine is moving along nicely into Christmas. So, Simon, are you rested after our break? I
am. And I think it's 16 weeks to Christmas and counting. And I think the fireworks have started going off over here as well. And but just back to what you were saying about, taking responsibility for lives. Somebody I spoke to over the summer said something profound. She said, success lies in the space between. And I think that's what we need to kind of teach our children. Yes, you need to be educated at school, but look with your own pair of eyes at things. And I think that's going to be kind of a bit of the theme today. We're going to talk about DEI and cultural awareness and all aspects of inclusion and diversity. And I think we all need to raise our level of awareness and consciousness. And that goes back to childhood.
Yes, it's, learn how to live and learn how to die. That's really what it is. Remove the fear because, in this construct that we live in, it's all desire and then everyone runs on fear. And I think when people see beyond all that, they can be enlightened and navigate through this whole process of life a lot happier as well. But that's very deep. We're getting very deep today, Simon. We're getting deep.
Well, it's 16 weeks to Christmas. You get deep.
Yeah, well, we have Halloween. As well. So tell me, who are our guests today?
Well, we have two really great guests, one from the UK and one from here in Ireland. First up is Brigid Farrell. She's based here in Ireland. I know her well. Her business is AllTalk Training, which she founded a few years ago. And she's an expert in helping multicultural teams and global companies boost their productivity and collaboration by overcoming communication issues, which for me is the heart of everything. Communication is about connection and it's about growth. So welcome, Brigid. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you, Joe.
Great to see you. And the second guest is from the UK. It's Alessandro, otherwise known as, I know you as Alex Storer, but Alessandro or Alex Storer. He is co-founder of Diversity Pride. You have, over a decade of really honed experience in helping organizations design and implement equality and inclusion initiatives globally. So Alex, welcome.
Thank you, Simon. It's great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. I think Joe's going to get straight into it.
Joe always gets straight into it. Welcome, folks. Yeah. Welcome to Business Eye here at Dublin South FM. It's great having you. So, the one thing, as we know, a lot of people are starting back and a lot of offices now are reopening. So staff are coming back in after being in lockdown or working in their little pods. And I think communication is going to be very important for a lot of people in a lot of organizations. And I wanted to hit that one with yourselves as well. Communication. What is communication when it comes to the corporate world?
Absolutely. It's a minefield. And I think, the whole pandemic, I think, is throwing a complete spanner in the works. I was listening this morning about some of the challenges now employers are going to face because the government is kind of washing the hands-on responsibilities around, what if you have a mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated workers? What kind of friction and envy and anger and resentment might all that cause? And of course, government's going to wash their hands and leave it to employers. So it'd be interesting to see how employers navigate this two-way communication. Alex, what do you think? What do you think about the whole area?
Well, I suppose communication is it's really how we can get any work done at the end of the day, isn't it? So it's absolutely essential, as I would say it also is in other areas of life. But I suppose communication, we have to be careful with communication at work, because if there is not good communication or smooth communication, or of course if there's a breakdown in communication, that can cost money, it can cost time, and it can cost relationships as well. And so I would say it's very, very important, and there's lots of chance, I think, around communication in the workplace at the moment, for multiple reasons. So I suppose I'm mostly concerned with, how different cultures communicate with each other, but also there's the added element now of, we're getting back into the office, but only some of us. There's so much virtual communication. How do we make sure everybody on a team, whether they're in the office or not, is, equally involved in the communication that's happening at work? So it's a very interesting space or topic, I suppose, at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to actually bring in a slightly different dimension when it comes to communication, because obviously people think of the things we say and the things we write, and there's newsletters and things, but it's going to be interesting because communication is everything that is around us, right? It's the behavior, is the little unspoken rules as we go back to the office, the way we treat each other. And that's where you talked about diversity, inclusion, belonging. That's where that kind of culture is made, is that little in between, like you were saying before. It's not just the formal communication that are broadcasted to your audience, to your workforce, but it's the cultures, the behavior that through all sorts of different types of communications you instill in your audience. And importantly for me, when it comes to communication, the way that you use it as an opportunity for authenticity and to create connections, because what we communicate and how we communicate really can bring people in or keep people out. They can create an us and them culture, a kind of top down culture, or it can create a real community. And I think now more than ever, as we go back to the office and as we relearn how to kind of, be around each other, having that kind of community around you, people that you can engage with at all sorts of different levels in terms of verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and so on, will define the next chapter of our culture in the workplace.
Our culture is changing in the workplace, and we've known that over the last couple of years as well. And especially as you said as well, Brigid, is that the multicultures that's coming in. With multiculture, there's one thing that I've learned. I've traveled all over the world, and I've met loads of people and lots of different, and had wonderful interaction with many different cultures as well. And, people over here, they go, oh, you can't say one thing or another because, you're offending that culture or whatever. But that's the person that's saying it, because, I've been in different cultures where someone might say something and say to me, oh, have I offended you? And I go, no, you haven't. It's always the one that's outside the culture who think they're offending the people that are inside the culture. And there's that divide. Like, everything seems to be evolving, that everything is divided. There's the right or the wrong, the left or the right, everything. And who's creating this divide in the first place? So, Simon knows that I'm very much believe that we are all one. Strip down barriers, strip down education, strip down culture, strip down religion, strip down, nationality. And at the end of it, we are all one. That's my philosophy in life. But why is there these divides, and who's feeding on them? Because someone is feeding on these. And someone is keeping them going on both sides as well. I know it's a bit long-winded, but I think it's important to get that across. So, Brigid, I'm going to throw that to you first.
Well, I suppose I think actually, people to offend other people from another culture is one of the most common reasons why people hold back from actually speaking up when they're in another culture. And I suppose the variety in the world is just, different cultures is phenomenal, and it keeps the world very, very interesting. But it also makes it a bit challenging for the reasons of, you don't want to offend people, for example. And I suppose the thing with culture is that we have things that easily identified about culture. We call it surface culture, such as, what flag, what colours are representative of a country or culture, the language or languages, or so you can't learn those from a culture so easily, but and this is where, different cultures and communicate, or different cultures make it difficult for cultures to come together and communicate easily. And it's very, very difficult for someone to just, walk into a conversation where it's a different culture and just know what does offend in that culture and what doesn't offend. And as well, you may also be walking into a conversation, so to speak, with multiple different cultures. So how you say might offend one person but not offend the others. It might also offend anybody, but the thing is, you just don't know that. And also, the people who are listening to you may not be prepared to be offended, so to speak. So they may not be prepared to hear a different way of communication that is not intended to be offensive, but because you're culturally, conditioned, so to speak, that you perceive it as something that you should be offended by. So it's very hard to say that, there's an easy solution to it, because there isn't really, because culture is complex by nature.
As I was listening to Brigid talking, I was thinking of two dimensions that I think might be useful to bring. One is evolutionary dimension, and one is more of a cognitive dimension. In evolutionary terms, I think it's important to remember that as humans, we have not been used to this amount of diversity and change around us for a long time. The acceleration brought by globalization, the things that we're exposed to now are very, very different to what humans have been used to for millennia. And the way that makes us react, is entering very much a fight or flight mode. And that's very, it's a very deep-rooted instinct that has allowed us to survive as a species. So I think we need to recognize that, because in evolutionary terms, what we're experiencing right now, what we've experienced for the last 100 years, let's say, if I'm thinking suffragette movements, if I'm thinking LGBT rights, and more recently the Black Lives Matter movement, all of the massive societal changes that are really putting at the forefront our diversity, our differences, and sometimes those differences can create barriers, can create fear. All of that in evolutionary terms is still very, very new. So we need to choose, and that's the cognitive dimension, we need to choose to actually consciously approaching those changes and those interactions, that multiculturalism that we're now much more embedded into, with a desire for growth, rather than allowing our fight or flight mode to kick in and enter in a zone of fear, and from fear then a kind of a very defensive sort of attitude towards those, and fear of offending others and so on. We have that wonderful ability as human beings, and that's made us so successful as a species, quickly to learn from experiences, to build new patterns, new neural patterns that help us navigate an ever more complex world. So I think we should recognize this is going to be a long-term process, because in evolutionary terms this is very new, but also that we have the skill set and the kind of capacity in our brain to really make the best of it and get into a constant zone of growth that will bring us into a whole different dimension as a society and as a culture. We will be much more able to navigate and benefit from this multiculturalism around us.
As you were both talking, I had this sounds mad, but I had this vision. Imagine if Earth were only populated by young children, right? Imagine if there were just 5 to 7-year-olds on planet Earth. I doubt that these barriers would exist. And the reason I say that is I spoke to somebody recently from Scandinavia, actually from Croatia, and she was talking about we're born authentic. And the problem is, as we go into our through childhood and school, and we learn through community and our twists and turns, we trade that authenticity for expectation, right? We create self-expectation. We have to fit in. It's fear, basically. And so I think it's the transition from childhood to adulthood that sucks us all in, and what do you both think about that? If we all thought, well, for a day, let's act like 7-year-olds, would some of this dissolve? It might be a silly question, but I think there's something big in this. What do you think, Brigid?
I think it would, but I think you'd have to actually go younger than 7. There's already so much conditioning that has taken place by, I would say, even 3 and 4, what's the idea of who or what is beautiful, and what does beauty look like, what is offensive and not, what is color is green, even from culture to culture. What I call green might be different in another culture. They might be more kind of a bluey in my eyes. So there's so much conditioning that already happens at such a young age that I really think it's a lovely idea, but I don't, I think it's human nature, I suppose, in a way, to find to feel like they have similarities with a group of people, rather than really seeing that actually you have so much more in common with all the people in the world, no matter what culture they come from. The same things are important, essentially: food, water, shelter, social connection. But unfortunately, the world has developed in such a way, and all the information we're receiving, it has come away from really thinking that, okay, we share the basic needs, to we are different, when really we're not actually that different. So if we could have just the world populated by all little kids and pause it, yes, I think that would be a really nice idea. It's an amazing image, I think.
I love the image of a world populated just by little toddlers, but I will challenge how inclusive that would be, and how much that population will be able to grow and learn, because I think we do need different generations to pass on those, that learning, and to educate the future generation and explain what matters, and how we want to shape the future together. So I think we need to put back a bit more responsibility on the older generations, for them to maybe change their ways in a way that can pass on a better, more inclusive type of message to the future generations. And I think age, when you look at workplace specifically, in fact, I was reading recently that over the last couple of years, I can't remember exactly when, we've tipped over a point where there's more over 50s in the world than there is under 5. So we are an aging population. There is a predominantly, older population in the world, that there is a younger population. And so that is an incredible asset. It could be seen as a danger, in terms of extinction and so on, but actually in terms of culture is an incredible asset, and we need to build on that. I think what's difficult, because of the conditioning that Brigid was mentioning, is the older we get, the more we become used to certain ways of thinking, of doing things. And that's where the responsibility lies, is for us adults today to really push our learning ourselves, towards a space of change. And change can be scary, but change is this amazing thing that sparks innovation and growth. If we can do that meaningfully, then we'll pass on a much more inclusive, a much better message and education to our future generations.
Culture change, Brigid, you mentioned it as well. And one of the things that, if you want to go back, Alex, what you said about, the old, there was a time long ago where a village was created, and the young would have children, and the old would rear them and educate them through wisdom. And as time went on, and as systems were placed upon people, they were pushed out of those communities and then into big cities, and it was out of, you talk about desire. So it was out of desire, and out of desire then creates, you have the ego, and out of the ego then you have fear. And then this is what is driving everybody as well. And, we talk about fear and fear of offending other people, but we should, we need to all take full responsibility, individual responsibility for ourselves and no one else. And in doing that, the two things that I think, we can talk about diversity and we talk about, cultures and all. I think if we start looking at getting people to have courage and truth in their own lives and sort of drive that message towards everybody and telling people, look, there's no great leader, there's no one out there. This is individual, personal responsibility for you. Look after yourself, be nice to everyone else, have that courage and truth, and then just navigate through life as well. I think if that was brought into an organization as a mission statement itself, and then focus on that, a lot would change. A lot would change within an organization.
Joe, it's funny. I've often thought, why don't they teach in every school two basic concepts? A, be nice to everybody. And if you can't be nice, at least don't do anybody else any harm. Why don't they just entrench this into our psyche? And then you're going to say...
I tell you why, Simon, is because division, when you teach division, in this corporate world, the fittest win. We've been brainwashed, like from the 80s, it was, Wall Street and all the movies. When you create that divide and have both sides feeding into it, the powers that be, whoever they are loving it because they believe that it's driving the economy. It's driving the economy on it.
There's another interesting aspect of inclusion, which we probably haven't thought about yet, really, and that's the age one, right? And I foresee a time, because on the one hand, I think the younger generations generally are becoming more conscious than us old people, right? I see that with my daughters. But on the other hand, there's a lot more old people in the world, right? Because we're living longer. And a friend of mine who was a guest on this show a while ago, he's 70 and he's got all his faculties and he's got huge ambition and he wants to keep public speaking and stuff. And he came out this week slightly tongue-in-cheek online and said, I formally identify as a 51-year-old. If you can identify sexuality and all that, why can't, and it was tongue-in-cheek and stuff, but the reason for that is that I see a time where, older people need to live longer, they're going to run out. Younger people have expectations. How is all of this going to figure out? I almost see a conflict between the younger generations and the older generations. Alex, what do you think about that for the future? Are you worried about that, or do you see a solution?
It's so interesting because we've had a conversation about it today, in fact, because one of the companies that I'm working with are organizing a couple of sessions on intergenerational dialogue and how you bring really different generations on board to work together, because we now can have up to 5 different generations working in the same workplace. And looking at the kind of older spectrum, I think what has gone wrong, especially in the corporate space that Joe was describing, that sort of this sort of stereotypes and so on, is that when you reach a certain age, there's no longer any serious investment in your future career. No one is really interested in what you want to do. I will always assume that you want to retire as soon as you possibly can. And in fact, what we're starting to see now with lots of corporates, even the big names that you wouldn't necessarily maybe expect to care that much, is they're starting to have longer term conversations about the career of all their employees to understand what they'd like to do. And rather than, assuming that everybody would want to, just retire, some people want to have a portfolio career. They might want to kind of, continue a part-time, a couple of days in the current company, but have, other opportunities to develop other interests. And those are conversations that we've never had before in the workplace. And those sort of things can actually add a massive amount of value today, because that individual will become much more productive, knowing that the company supports them in the type of future career path that they want to take, even if that takes them partially out of the company. So I think looking at career pathways in a much more creative way, and actually realizing that older people remain productive much longer. It's not that just we live longer, we also remain productive much longer, and we want to do more for much longer. And there's all sorts of things that corporates are starting to build on, because those individuals may become great mentors and coaches. They may slightly shape those roles and actually add an incredible amount of value rather than being a cost to the company, so to speak. So I think, it has to do a lot with the way that we reshape the idea of career and what we do in our older age with our work and how we find purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah, I think we have to look at people as well as, we change all throughout our lives. And I mean, I don't have evidence up to a certain age because of my age for myself, but I know if I look back, at 3 years ago, 6 years ago, 9 years ago, how much I have changed in that space of time, and the skills that I have gained. Some, I've left behind because maybe I'm better at others, or some that I've developed more, and then also the experience that comes with life, I suppose, of dealing with people. We have to look at people, I think, as, they're not just, they don't start at one point and then it's linear. People change in many ways over a period. And I suppose a reevaluation of skills someone can bring to a workplace at different points is very valuable. And Alex mentioned as well, imagine the wealth of knowledge and the skills and maybe mentoring and coaching in certain organizations as well could be incredibly valuable. So I think it's great that we're having more of a conversation about that. And actually, to go back to what you were saying as well, Joe, about courage and truth in an organization, I think for all aspects of diversity, the courage for me is really the courage to have a conversation about it. And I think that's what's lacking so often, is that everybody is afraid to talk because, again, it's about offending people, not culturally, but just, no matter who or where, generally, yeah. And they're afraid of offending. And, really it's only by having a conversation about it that we can discover, where do we go from here? How can we make this better for everybody? How can we make sure that people are, have their priorities changed over time, have their skills changed over time, and it's only by actually having a conversation that we can find out all of those things about those who we are working with or we're managing. So I think the courage to have a conversation, I think, would be the thing that I would really say, please do that. Please have the courage to do that.
Alex, you were going to add something. I saw you were dying to jump in there.
Yeah, no, it's just because as we were talking about communication and the courage to have that conversation in a workplace context, but also in educational context, I think there's also the need for employers and institutions to have the courage to allow those conversations to happen, because especially in the workplace, we can have very rigid policies and zero tolerance and things that can scare people away from having that conversation. And that fear of saying something wrong is often fueled by the fear of having, real consequences on their jobs, losing their jobs and so on, being fired. And actually, we know now that to create that kind of culture that we've talked about, we need to be brave also from a corporate point of view, not just from an individual. Individuals need to have that responsibility, but they need to feel that the environment that they're in, whether it's corporate or otherwise, has created a psychological safety around them, has created a we can make mistakes. And if we do make a mistake, we learn from it, we apologize and we move on. But in the past, too often, those mistakes have been labeled as you've done something wrong and therefore you be disciplined. And that stifles conversation that is meaningful and can bring real change. It's
one of the things where myself and Simon, we spoke about this before, men in our 50s, we look back for the last couple of years and go, oh my God, if I knew now what I knew then. And I'm sure when we're in our 60s, we'll go, what I know now, if I knew this when I was in my 50s. And it reminds me of the story about the guy, and you're talking there, Alex, about skills as well. The guy that walks into a building and there's something wrong with the plumbing and he hits it with a hammer and hands your man a bill for £1,000. And your man goes, hang on, you just hit that pipe with a hammer and it's £1,000, your man says 40 years of skill, and that's really what it is. I think it's communication between all. I think everybody thinks they know best. I think everybody is driven by their desires, their and pride. And I think then if people start to understand their pride, their desires, which are feeding into those fears, which cause divide within an organization as well, that if I think, you really sit down with people and make them understand that at a deeper level, you can make a lot of changes in an organization.
What I take from all of this is, I've noticed there's huge talk about the importance of mindfulness and empathy and resilience and grit and all these things, but I don't think we as a race talk enough, and this is right down Brigid of her business, AllTalk Training. I don't think we really work enough to talk about the importance of communication as connecting. It's not just communication, it's connecting, right? And if we really work at it intentionally, we can connect better, we can raise our own awareness, and we can break down barriers. And I think this should go right back to schools. Communication isn't just about words and reading, it's about visceral connection, right? And that's something of a bit of a crusade of mine. I'll leave it at that from me.
Well, I'm going to ask, and guys, I want to ask you a question, since we're talking about this and we're talking about, talking about a lot of things. But, the question I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts then on death? And what would you expect in the last 3 minutes of your life?
Oh my God, I don't think I've ever thought about my death before. I think it's something that hopefully keeps us focused on wanting to do the best that we can every day. And this is what I would like to, be able to look back and think, I have lived a life that was meaningful, and that every day has added a little bit, not to my own experience, but also to the experience of others around me. I've left the world a little bit better than I found it. So I exit it, happy that I've contributed to it during my life here.
I think I'm still stumped, to be honest. I think, like Alex, I also wouldn't think about it so much, but I often, of course, sometimes that thought might come into your mind, and I always just feel that I think it comes back to as well, if you feel that you've been kind, you've done the best you can, where in the aspect of life, that when I think then about death, I think that I'm happy to go, that it's something that's so uncontrollable. We have really no control over that, and so it's something that I don't dwell on too much. So I wasn't expecting that question.
Death doesn't scare me at all. Pain doesn't really scare me. What concerns me is the fear of pain, right? But in my last 3 minutes, I just hope I can go with as clear a conscience as possible. I hope I don't have guilt or regrets in those last 3 minutes. That's me.
That's it. It's my thoughts on that as well, Simon, where, on my deathbed, I'll have the packed lunch ready and my fingers up ready to go as I'm jumping into a new dimension. And it is, life, we can go through this whole life and we can be who we are. But I think those last 3 minutes, as you said it there, Simon, is the guilt. Can you, if you have done anyone else wrong or hurt anyone, in their life, can you live with that guilt in those last 3 minutes of your life? The regrets of not doing who you are, or not being the person that you should have been, remembering who you really are. So, and on that, I'll ask the two guys here, I want you to wake up in the morning, okay? And I want you to think that you're going to die on the 22nd of December, 2020. And I want you to see how your life will change when you wake up tomorrow and you're dying on that date. How you will perceive and how you will act with courage and truth for those months ahead. Life-changing experience. 2021. Yes, 2020. I'm still living in that year. I haven't left this room since then. have it on it as well. Guys, thanks for coming on. If someone wants to reach out to you, where can they get in touch with yourselves? Brigid, we'll start with yourself.
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Brigid Farrell, or of course you can go to our website, www.alltalktraining.com.
And for me, same. So Alex or Alessandra works as well. Alex Storer on LinkedIn or diversitypride.org.
Sponsored by the Dunleary Rattown Local Enterprise Office. You're listening to Business Eye on Dublin South FM.
Here we go, Simon. Another gorgeous Friday. Two amazing guests that we had on the show today. For me, it's a lot to think about, a lot to process as well. But I think you and me are flying through the air with our thoughts and where we're going in this world as well. And I think it's a new month. We're coming into the final run of the year as well. So, anything to add to that, Simon, before we wrap it up?
No, other than you and I are never going to retire. We're just going to die, Joe.
Die. As I say, learn how to live and learn how to die. Until next week, folks, I want to say thanks for listening to Business Eye here at Dublin South FM Radio, where myself and Simon are always sharing our knowledge and bringing on wonderful guests so you can actually expand your wisdom and your knowledge as well. If you want to reach out to myself and Simon, it's businesseyeadvisory.com. That's businesseyeadvisory.com, where you can catch us, jump online. We have a group set up as well, where we will be sharing more insights with you on a monthly basis. Till then, God bless, take care, courage and faith. Goodbye.